In a quiet classroom on the outskirts of Detroit, 15-year-old Leyla had always been invisible to her teacher, Ms. Harris, who despised her because of the color of her skin. But one day, Ms. Harris decided to publicly humiliate the girl, not realizing that Leyla was preparing a surprise that would change the rules of the game forever. Can music become her voice in the fight against injustice? The classroom at Riverside High in Detroit hummed with a low murmur of teenage voices, a familiar chaos that filled the air before the bell rang. Leyla Johnson sat at the back, her dark curls spilling over the edge of her notebook as she scratched out a rhythm with her pencil. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't nerves, just a habit, one her father always teased her about. "You're going to wear a hole through that paper one day," he'd say, laughing. But it helped her focus, and in a room like this, focus was her shield. At 15, Leyla was used to blending into the background. Not because she was shy. She wasn't, but because people like Mrs. Esther Harris made sure she stayed there. Mrs. Harris, the history teacher with 20 years under her belt, stood at the front of the room, flipping through her notes with a sharpness that matched her pressed blazer. She was known for her no-nonsense attitude, her clipped commands, and the way she ruled her classroom like a queen on a chessboard. Strict, sure, but fair, unless you were someone like Leyla. It wasn't loud or obvious, the way Mrs. Harris treated her. She didn't yell or call her out in front of everyone. Not yet, anyway. It was subtler than that. A glance that lingered too long. A question skipped over even when Layla's hand was raised. A tight-lipped him whenever she dared to speak up. Leyla noticed it from the first week of 10th grade. So did some of her classmates. "She acts like you're not even here," Jake Miller had muttered once, leaning over from the seat next to her. Leyla had just shrugged. "Guess I'm good at disappearing." But she wasn't invisible, not really. She was just inconvenient. Her skin, a rich brown that caught the light streaming through the window, seemed to be the problem. Mrs. Harris never said it outright. No one did in 2025, not in a school that prided itself on diversity, but Leyla felt it. The way the teacher's eyes slid past her, the way her tone cooled whenever Layla's name came up. It was a quiet kind of erasure, and Leyla had learned to live with it. Until today, the lesson started like any other. Mrs. Harris paced in front of the whiteboard, her heels clicking against the tile floor as she launched into a lecture about the civil rights movement. Leyla listened, her pencil hovering over her notebook, jotting down dates and names. She liked history, not the dry way Mrs. Harris taught it, but the real stories, the ones her grandma used to tell her about marching in Selma, singing gospel until her throat burned. Those were the stories that mattered. "Leyla," Mrs. Harris's voice cut through the room like a blade, sharp and sudden. Heads turned. Leyla froze, her pencil mid-tap. The teacher's eyes locked onto her, a glint of something. Anticipation, maybe, flickering in them. "Come up to the board. Tell us about the Montgomery bus boycott." The room went quiet, save for a few muffled whispers. Jake shot her a quick look, his eyebrows raised like he couldn't believe it. Leyla stood, smoothing her jeans as she walked to the front. She could feel every stare, every held breath. Mrs. Harris stepped aside, folding her arms, her lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. Leyla knew that look. It wasn't a chance to shine, it was a chance to fall. She turned to the board, chalk in hand, and took a breath. The Montgomery bus boycott started in 1955 after Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, she began, her voice steady. It lasted over a year, organized by people like Martin Luther King Jr. and the NAACP. Black folks walked instead of taking buses, even when it meant miles in the rain. It wasn't just about seats, it was about dignity. She paused, glancing at Mrs. Harris. The teacher's face was unreadable, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Leyla kept going. "My grandma told me her cousin was there. She said they sang to keep going, old songs like Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Round. It was their way of fighting without fists." The class was silent. No one snickered. No one shifted in their seats. Even Sarah Brown, who usually rolled her eyes at everything, sat still, watching. Leyla set the chalk down and stepped back, her heart thumping. Not from fear, but from the weight of what she'd just said. She'd given more than an answer. She'd given a piece of herself. Mrs. Harris cleared her throat, breaking the spell. Adequate, she said, her tone flat, like she was grading a math problem instead of a story. Sit down. Leyla returned to her seat, feeling Jake's elbow nudge her as she passed. That was dope, he whispered. She didn't reply, just sank into her chair, her pencil tapping again. But Mrs. Harris wasn't done. As the bell neared, she closed her book with a snap and looked at Leyla again. You mentioned your grandmother sang gospel, she said, her voice carrying a strange edge. Tomorrow, you'll sing for us. There's a piano in the corner. She nodded toward the dusty old upright, its keys yellowed with age. Let's see if you've got any of that spirit in you. The room buzzed. Layla's stomach twisted. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a trap. Mrs. Harris's eyes gleamed with something cold, something that said she expected Leyla to stumble, to prove whatever she'd already decided about her. The bell rang, and students shuffled out, whispering. You gonna do it? Jake asked, slinging his bag over his shoulder. Leyla didn't answer right away. She just stared at the piano, its chipped edges glowing faintly in the afternoon light. Yeah, she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. I am. Leyla didn't sleep much that night. She lay in her bed on Detroit's west side, staring at the cracked ceiling of her small bedroom, the streetlights outside casting thin shadows through the blinds. Her mind kept replaying Mrs. Harris's words. Let's see if you've got any of that spirit in you. The way she'd said it, the faint curl of her lip, it wasn't encouragement. It was a dare, a setup dressed up as an opportunity. Leyla knew it, felt it deep in her bones. Mrs. Harris didn't think she could do it. She was counting on her to fail. Downstairs, the TV murmured faintly, her dad watching late-night reruns, probably laughing at some old sitcom. Leyla rolled onto her side, pulling the blanket tighter. She wasn't scared, not exactly. Nervous, maybe, but it was more than that. It was anger, simmering low and steady, mixed with something else, determination. She'd seen that look in Mrs. Harris's eyes before, the one that said Leyla didn't belong, that she was less than. It wasn't new, but this time it was personal. Her thoughts drifted to her grandma, Ruth. Grandma Ruth had been a force, small but mighty, with a voice that could shake a room. She'd sung gospel in church choirs and marched with civil rights folks back in the 60s, her stories full of fire and faith. When they try to shut you down, baby, she'd told Leyla once, her hands rough but warm, you sing louder. You show him who you are. Leyla had been 5 when she first sat at Grandma Ruth's piano, her tiny fingers stumbling over the keys while the old woman hummed This Little Light of Mine. By 10, she could play it blindfolded. Mrs. Harris didn't know that part. She didn't know Leyla had spent years at that same piano after Grandma Ruth passed, teaching herself the songs her grandma loved, gospel, blues, anything with soul. She didn't know Leyla could make the keys talk, tell stories of pain and triumph without saying a word. And that was the thing. Mrs. Harris thought she had Leyla figured out. Quiet, invisible, just another black girl who'd shrink under pressure. Tomorrow, Leyla would prove her wrong. Morning came too fast. Leyla walked to Riverside High through the chilly March air, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her breath fogging in front of her. The school loomed ahead, all gray brick and narrow windows, the kind of place that swallowed you if you let it. She didn't let it. Not today. In the hallway, the buzz was already starting. Whispers about her, about the piano, about Mrs. Harris's curveball. You really gonna sing? Sarah Brown asked as Leyla passed her locker, her tone half curious, half mocking. Leyla didn't stop. Guess you'll find out, she said, keeping her eyes forward. History class arrived like a storm rolling in. Mrs. Harris swept into the room, her usual stack of books under her arm, her posture stiff as ever. The students settled into their seats, but the air felt different, charged like everyone knew something was coming. Leyla sat at the back, her notebook open, her pencil still. Jake leaned over. You good? He whispered. She nodded once, sharp and sure. She was more than good. She was ready. Mrs. Harris started the lesson, something about the Voting Rights Act, but her eyes kept flicking to Leyla, quick and deliberate. Halfway through, she stopped, closing her book with a soft thud. Before we move on, she said, her voice cutting through the room. "We have a little demonstration." She turned to Leyla, her smile tight. "Leyla, you said your grandmother sang gospel. Yesterday, you gave us a nice little story. Today, let's hear the real thing. The piano's right there." She gestured to the corner, where the old upright sat, its chipped keys glinting faintly under the fluorescent lights. The room shifted. Whispers rippled through the seats, some excited, some skeptical. Sarah smirked, folding her arms. Jake sat up straighter, his eyes wide. Leyla didn't move right away. She let the moment stretch, feeling Mrs. Harris's gaze, the weight of it like a challenge carved in stone. Then she stood, her sneakers quiet against the floor, and walked to the front. Every step echoed in her head, steady as a drumbeat. Mrs. Harris stepped back, crossing her arms. "Whenever you're ready," she said, her tone clipped, like she was already picturing Leyla fumbling. Leyla stopped in front of the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys. They were cold, slightly sticky from years of neglect, nothing like the warm, worn ivory of Grandma Ruth's instrument. She sat down, her back straight, and glanced at the class. Faces stared back, some curious, some waiting for a train wreck. Then she looked at Mrs. Harris. The teacher's expression was unreadable, but her eyes said it all. "Go ahead. Prove me right." Leyla's hands hovered over the keys. She could feel the tension coiling inside her, the anger, the pride, the memory of her grandma's voice. This wasn't just about singing. It was about fighting, quietly, legally, morally, the way Grandma Ruth had taught her. Mrs. Harris wanted her to fail, to reinforce whatever box she'd put Leyla in. But Leyla wasn't here to fail. She was here to break that box wide open. She pressed the first key, a low, resonant note that hung in the air like a promise. Then another. The room held its breath. Mrs. Harris tilted her head, just slightly, her lips parting as if to speak. But Leyla didn't give her the chance. She was already gone, lost in the music, ready to show them all what she'd been hiding. The first note lingered in the air, soft but deliberate, a low hum from the old piano that seemed to pull the room into focus. Leyla's fingers rested on the keys, steady despite the faint tremor in her chest. She could feel the eyes on her, 30 pairs, maybe more, watching, waiting, judging. The classroom at Riverside High had never been this still, the usual rustle of papers and muffled coughs swallowed by an electric silence. Even the clock above the door seemed to pause, its ticking drowned out by the weight of the moment. She didn't look up. Not yet. Her gaze stayed on the keys, yellowed, chipped, out of tune just enough to notice. It wasn't Grandma Ruth's piano, with its rich, warm tones that filled their little house on Sundays. This one was tired, neglected, but Leyla didn't care. She'd make it sing anyway. Her left hand pressed down, laying a slow, steady rhythm, a gospel bass line she'd learned at 7. Then her right hand joined, threading a melody through the air, "Oh, Freedom," one of Grandma Ruth's favorites. The notes were simple at first, almost fragile, but they carried something heavier, something alive. The class shifted. A few kids leaned forward. Jake, his elbows on his desk, eyes wide. Sarah, her smirk fading into something uncertain. Behind her, Leyla heard a stifled snicker, quick and sharp, probably from one of the boys in the back who had whispered bets about her crashing and burning. She ignored it. This wasn't about them. It wasn't even about Mrs. Harris anymore. Though Leyla could feel the teacher's presence like a shadow, standing near the whiteboard with her arms crossed, her breath held tight. Then she sang. Her voice started low, a quiet tremble that rose from her chest, wrapping around the piano's chords like a vine. "Oh, freedom! Oh, freedom!" The words came soft but clear, each one a step forward, a declaration. She closed her eyes, letting the music take her back to Grandma Ruth's living room. The creak of the floorboards, the smell of fried chicken drifting from the kitchen. "Oh, freedom over me." Her voice grew stronger, richer, filling the room with a sound that didn't belong in a high school classroom. It was church, it was protest, it was history spilling out of her. The snickering stopped. The whispers died. Leyla's fingers danced over the keys, weaving the melody higher, her left hand rolling out a bass line, that pulsed like a heartbeat. She didn't stumble, didn't hesitate. She knew this song, knew it in her blood, her bones, the way Grandma Ruth had taught her. And before I be a slave, I be buried in my grave. Her voice soared, raw and unpolished but piercing, cutting through the air like a blade of light. It wasn't perfect, not technically. Years of singing alone in her room couldn't match a choir's polish. But it was real, and that made it unstoppable. She opened her eyes. The room had changed. Jake's mouth hung open slightly, his usual grin replaced by something close to awe. Sarah sat rigid, her arms uncrossed, her hands gripping the edge of her desk. In the back, the boys who'd laughed were still, their faces blank, like they didn't know what to do with what they were hearing. And Mrs. Harris, Leyla caught her out of the corner of her eye, stood frozen, her lips pressed into a thin line, her knuckles white where her arms squeezed tighter. The teacher's face was a mask, but her eyes betrayed her. She hadn't expected this. Not even close. Leyla pushed harder. Her fingers flew into a run, a flurry of notes that climbed and dipped, a trick Grandma Ruth had shown her to wake the room up. The piano groaned under her touch, its warped soundboard straining, but she made it work. The melody swelled, her voice rising with it, and go home to my Lord and be free, until the walls seemed to shake with the force of it. She wasn't just singing now. She was telling a story, her grandma's story, her family's story, her story. Every note was a brick pulled from the wall Mrs. Harris had built around her, every word a crack in the teacher's smug certainty. The silence that followed was deafening. Layla's hands lifted from the keys, the final chord fading into the air like smoke. She sat there, breathing hard, her chest rising and falling as the echo of her voice hung between them all. No one moved. No one spoke. Then from the back, a single clap, tentative, almost accidental. Another followed, sharper this time. Then Jake joined in, his hands slamming together with a grin breaking across his face. Within seconds, the room erupted, applause rolling over her like a wave. "Yo, what?" someone shouted, probably Marcus, one of the back row skeptics. Sarah turned in her seat, her eyes darting between Leyla and the others, like she couldn't decide what to feel. The noise grew, chaotic and alive, chairs scraping as kids stood, whistling, clapping, a few even stomping their feet. Leyla didn't move. She kept her hands in her lap, her face calm, letting it wash over her. She'd done it. She'd turned their doubt into something else, something they couldn't ignore. Mrs. Harris stepped forward, her heels ascending the desk, her voice cutting through the noise. "That's enough," she said, sharp and brittle. The clapping faltered, then died as students sank back into their seats. Her eyes locked onto Layla's, dark and unyielding. "This isn't a talent show. Sit down." Leyla didn't flinch. She met the teacher's gaze, steady, unflinching. "You wanted me to sing," she said, her voice quiet but firm. I sang. The room held its breath again, the air thick with unspoken words. Mrs. Harris's jaw tightened, a flicker of something, anger, maybe shame, crossing her face. But Leyla had seen it. They all had. She'd shaken the queen's throne, and there was no going back. The applause still echoed in Layla's ears as she slid back in her seat, her hands steady but her pulse racing. The classroom at Riverside High buzzed with a restless energy, the kind that lingers after something big happens, something no one saw coming. Jake leaned over, his voice low but urgent. "Bro, you just flipped this whole place upside down. You see her face." Leyla didn't need to look at Mrs. Harris to know what he meant. She'd felt it. The shift, the crack in the teacher's armor, when her voice and the piano had filled the room. Mrs. Harris stood by her desk, her arms still crossed, her posture rigid like she was trying to hold the pieces of her authority together. The clapping had stopped at her command, but the silence that followed wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to Leyla. Students shifted in their seats, stealing glances at her, at each other, at the teacher whose usual control seemed thinner now, fragile. Sarah Brown twisted a strand of hair around her finger, her lips parted like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Marcus, the back row skeptic, leaned back with his arms folded, muttering, didn't think she had it in her. Then Jake spoke up, his voice cutting through the hush like a spark. "Mrs. Harris, why'd you even call her up if you didn't think she could do it?" Heads turned. Layla's breath caught, not from fear, but from the sudden jolt of his words. Jake wasn't loud, wasn't aggressive, but he didn't back down either. He sat there, elbows on his desk, staring at the teacher with a mix of curiosity and defiance. Mrs. Harris's eyes snapped to him, sharp as a blade. "Excuse me," she said, her tone icy, the kind that usually shut questions down cold. But Jake didn't flinch. "I mean, you never call on her. Ever. Then you tell her to sing out of nowhere? Kind of feels like you wanted her to mess up." A few murmurs rippled through the room. Quiet agreements, nervous laughs. Sarah nodded, just slightly, like she couldn't help it. Leyla watched, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected anyone to say it out loud. But Jake had, and now the air felt heavier, charged with something raw and real. Mrs. Harris's face tightened, her fingers curling against her arms. "This is a classroom, not a debate club," she said, her voice clipped. "I gave Leyla an opportunity to share something personal. She did. That's all." "No, it's not," Leyla said, her voice calm but firm, slicing through the tension like a steady hand. She stood again, her chair scraping softly against the floor. Every eye swung back to her. Mrs. Harris's head jerked slightly, her mask slipping for a split second. "You didn't think I could do it," Leyla continued, stepping forward. "You thought I'd stand there and stumble, make a fool of myself. That's why you picked me. Not Jake, not Sarah, not Marcus. Me." The room went still. Mrs. Harris's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes narrowing. "That's enough, Leyla," she said, but her voice wavered, just enough to notice. Leyla didn't stop. "You've ignored me all year. Looked past me like I don't matter. But I do. And today, you had to hear me." She paused, letting the words settle. Everyone did. A beat of silence stretched out, thick and heavy. Then Marcus let out a low whistle. "She's not wrong," he said, half to himself, half to the room. Sarah shifted in her seat, her eyes flicking to Mrs. Harris like she was seeing her for the first time. Jake grinned, a slow, quiet thing that said he'd known Leyla had this in her all along. The murmurs grew, a current running through the class, and Mrs. Harris's grip on her book tightened, her knuckles paling. "I said that's enough," she snapped, louder this time, her voice regaining its edge. "Sit down, all of you. We're moving on." But no one moved fast. The energy lingered, defiant, alive. Leyla sat, her back straight, her hands resting on her desk. She'd said what she needed to say. She'd made them listen. By the end of the day, word had spread. Leyla felt it in the hallways, whispers following her like shadows, kids she barely knew nodding at her as she passed. She pulled out her phone in the bathroom between classes, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened the camera roll. She'd recorded the performance, hit the button on her phone just before she started, a quiet instinct telling her to keep proof. Watching it back, the sound was tinny, the angle shaky, but her voice cut through clear as day. She hesitated, then uploaded it to the school's group chat with a simple caption. "This is me." The response was instant. Messages flooded in, shock, praise, emojis of fire, and clapping hands. "Yo, that was insane," Jake texted privately. "You're a legend." By lunch, the video had 50 shares. By dismissal, it was everywhere, parents' inboxes, the principal's desk. Leyla walked out of school that afternoon, the late March sun casting long shadows across the parking lot, and felt the weight lift just a little. The next morning, Mrs. Harris stood in front of the class, her face stiff, her hands clasped tight. "I owe an apology," she said, the words sounding like they'd been pried out of her. "To Leyla. Yesterday, I misjudged her." The room was quiet, but the victory wasn't in the words. It was in the way she wouldn't meet Layla's eyes, the way her voice cracked on misjudged. Leyla sat still, her expression calm. She didn't need the apology. She'd already won. Later, Principal Carter called Leyla to his office. "That video caused a stir," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Parents are asking questions. We're looking into it." He paused, studying her. "You've got a gift, Leyla. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. The rules had changed, not just for her, but for everyone who'd seen her stand tall. The air at Riverside High felt different after that day. It wasn't loud or obvious, not like the movies where everything changes overnight with dramatic music and slow-motion walks down the hall. But Leyla felt it, a quiet shift in the way people moved around her. The whispers didn't stop, but they weren't mocking anymore. Kids she'd never spoken to, girls from the cheer squad, guys from the basketball team, nodded at her in the cafeteria, their eyes lingering like they were seeing her for the first time. Even the teachers seemed to pause when she passed, their conversations dipping into hushed tones. Mrs. Harris was still there, still teaching history with her clipped voice and rigid posture, but something had cracked. She didn't call on Leyla again, not that week anyway, and when their eyes met, it was the teacher who looked away first. The apology she'd given in class hung between them, hollow but permanent, a mark Leyla had forced her to leave. By Friday, word came down from the principal's office. Mrs. Harris was being reassigned to administrative duties starting next semester. No one said it was because of Leyla's video, but no one had to. The group chat buzzed with speculation. She's out 'cause she couldn't handle the heat. Marcus posted with a laughing emoji, and Leyla let herself smile, just a little. Lunch that day was louder than usual. Leyla sat at her regular table near the window, picking at a tray of fries, when Jake slid in across from her, his grin wide. "You hear about the concert?" he asked, dropping his backpack with a thud. She frowned. "What concert?" Sarah plopped down next to him, her usual edge softened by curiosity. "City Hall's doing a spring thing downtown," she said. "They saw your video. Someone sent it to the mayor's office or something. They want you to perform." Leyla froze, a fry halfway to her mouth. "You serious?" Jake nodded, pulling out his phone to show her the email forwarded from the school counselor. "We'd be honored to have Leyla Johnson share her talent at the Detroit Spring Showcase." The words blurred as she read them, her chest tightening, not with nerves, but with something warmer, something proud. "Told you," Jake said, leaning back. "You're a legend now." She didn't feel like a legend, not yet, but she felt seen, and that was enough. The rest of the week blurred by, classes, whispers, a meeting with the counselor to confirm the gig. By Saturday, Leyla was standing in her kitchen, the smell of her dad's famous chili simmering on the stove. She told him everything that night: Mrs. Harris, the piano, the video, the concert. He'd listened, his broad hands resting on the table, his face shifting from concern to a slow, deep grin. "Your grandma'd be proud," he said when she finished, his voice rough but soft. "She always said you had her fire. That voice of yours, it's not just yours, Leyla. It's ours. All of us who came before you." He reached across, squeezing her hand. "You made that woman hear you. Made him all hear you." Leyla swallowed, her throat tight. "Felt like I had to," she said. He nodded, his eyes shining. "That's how justice starts, baby. One voice at a time." The concert came fast. Downtown Detroit glittered under a cool March sky, the stage set up in Hart Plaza with a crowd spilling across the pavement. Families, kids, folks in coats clutching coffee cups. Leyla stood backstage, her fingers brushing the keys of a borrowed keyboard, her stomach fluttering but her mind clear. She wore her favorite jacket, dark blue, patched to the elbows, and her dad's old chain necklace, a piece of him she'd asked to borrow. "For luck," she'd said. He'd laughed. "You don't need luck, kid. You've got you." When her name was called, the crowd clapped, polite at first, then louder as she stepped into the spotlight. She didn't speak, just sat at the keyboard and let her hands find their place. The first notes of "Oh, Freedom" rang out, crisp and strong, her voice following like a river breaking free. "Oh, freedom, oh, freedom." The words carried over the plaza, weaving through the chatter, the wind, the distant hum of traffic. People stopped, turned, listened. A few swayed, some closed their eyes, and Leyla saw it. The way her music reached them, the way it held them. She played for 10 minutes. Gospel, a little blues, a song she'd written herself last summer. And when she finished, the applause roared, deep and real. She stood, bowing slightly, her heart pounding with a quiet joy. Backstage, her dad pulled her into a hug, his voice thick. "That's my girl," he said. She hugged him back, feeling the weight of his words, the weight of everything she'd done. Monday at school, the change was undeniable. Kids stopped her in the hall. "Saw you downtown, you killed it." And even Sarah muttered a grudging, "That was pretty cool." Principal Carter called her in again, this time with a smile. "You've started something, Leyla," he said. "We're revising our staff training. No one should feel invisible here." She nodded, knowing it wasn't perfect, knowing it wouldn't fix everything. But it was a start. Walking home that afternoon, the sun low over the Detroit skyline, Leyla felt lighter. She stopped at a corner store, grabbing a soda from Mr. Lee, who grinned and said, "Heard you're famous now." She laughed, shaking her head. "Not famous. Just loud." He winked. "Loud's good, kid. Keep it up." At home, she sat at Grandma Ruth's piano, her fingers tracing the keys. She didn't play. Not yet. Just sat there, breathing in the quiet. Mrs. Harris had tried to silence her, to box her in with doubt and dismissal. But Leyla had fought back, not with fists or threats, but with the one thing they couldn't take, her voice. And in the end, justice wasn't just the teacher's reassignment or the concert stage. It was the way the world had to listen, the way she'd made them see her. She smiled, soft and sure. She'd keep singing, because now they couldn't look away.